Hello there, guys. Vampire of Chelsea, live from my nan's house, as some of you guys were saying the other day. And I didn't expect to be making another video so quickly, but listen, this is a show about Chelsea, so we know how absolutely mental this club is, and Chelsea have done another Chelsea. The exclusive from Matt Law is that Mauricio Pochettino has left Chelsea by mutual consent after meeting with the sporting directors Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart over the course of 2 days. Apparently, he's agreed his departure with Chelsea late on Tuesday morning, following the club's end of season review that started on Monday. Apparently, there's no bad blood between Poch and the club. And as has been talked about in the media in recent days, potential replacements cite Sebastian Hoeneß from Stuttgart, Kieran McKenna from Ipswich Town, and of course Enzo Maresca from Leicester City. I don't know how to react to this. The title of my review for Bournemouth was simply, Chelsea would be stupid to sack Pochettino. And my stance, a day later, is no different, of course, because I just don't understand how we've come to this place. Now, of course, the framing of this makes it seem like Poch has just walked, but I think if you just think that Poch has just walked on it by his own volition and, has shocked the club on that sense, I don't think that's a very fair assessment, and that doesn't kind of take into account what he's experienced through this year to get him to a place where he is in a mind to walk away from a place where he's just got the club back into European football. There's maybe a sense of positivity around the club growing. Clearly he hasn't seen eye to eye. Clearly he feels like he is not being put in a good place to move the club forward for his own reputation. And I think now, the last few weeks with Poch becoming a little bit like CM Poch and, throwing the pipe bombs down and, throwing shots above him. I said whilst that was going on, is this a sign of Pochettino getting more comfortable in his role to speak more freely? And actually, now with what's just happened, it kind of more feels like he was dropping bombs before he walks out the door. I'm sure we'll hear more about how we came to this place, but I can't believe this has become an overnight decision. I firmly believe this is the culmination of a lot of things that have happened throughout the course of the season, and I wouldn't be surprised if the straw that broke the camel's back for Pochettino is in terms of the transfer strategy, is in terms of the sporting directors. And it's been something I've talked about throughout the entirety of this season or last season, was this issue with the lack of accountability for the sporting directors, their process, their judgment on the way they've gone about signing players. And I think there is a real hypocrisy in talking so openly that you want a collaboration with the head coach. But then it seems like they want a head coach that collaborates, but then we won't listen to anything you say as the head coach. So finding someone who's not going to challenge you in that way in this modern game, I think you're asking a lot there of a lot of head coaches. And it's not to say that you cannot work within a model where, I think Chicago Dimitri put it best the other day, is like, it's not that a singular head coach should have the power to say, I want to sign this player, like specific players. It's about profiles you need, and whether those profiles align with the club, those should be clarified before you appoint a head coach in the first place. And on top of that, I purely look at this and go, again, when you bring in someone else, how are we not going to end at the same place? And I think it calls into question, again, the whole strategy about the club. There also is the reality that has to come in here that since this new ownership came in the summer of 2022, they sacked Thomas Tuchel within 2 months. They brought in Graham Potter on a massive contract. They sacked him within, under a year. He didn't even get a full season. Sacked him in April, then they brought in Frank Lampard on an interim, and then they brought in Mauricio Pochettino. Pochettino got a full season, but he hasn't got a second season. So again, if you're a head coach from the outside looking at this, I'm not saying that none of those coaches mentioned won't take this job because there's money there, right? And people will look at it and go, it's Chelsea, right? And they'll back themselves to be successful. But Pochettino, this is the reality. He performed to the required kind of minimum level. He got sixth place. He got European football. He took a very inexperienced young squad who had a severe injury crisis and got them to play some really nice football at the end of the season. That's not to take any of the blame away from Pochettino. I think in the assessment of Pochettino as a Chelsea head coach, I feel like we'll look back and go, that Carabao Cup final extra time stands out massively in terms of how much blame you put on Pochettino, how much blame you put on the makeup of the squad being so young and inexperienced. But of course, the coach has to take some responsibility. The defensive record being so poor, the failure to beat teams like Sheffield United and Burnley, points that could have got Chelsea actually higher up in the table. But I can't see how this helps Chelsea. I really can't, because the options being touted are younger. So they are coaches who could fall into that Graham Potter trap of having a good CV. To go from, let's, take an example here. Kieran McKenna has done a fabulous job at Ipswich Town. Ipswich have, broken ground. They historic success this season for them as a club. But to move from that to Chelsea, where you're in European football and there is a severe increase in expectation, that was always the big thing with Poch that I thought made him a suitable candidate for the time and place in Chelsea history, was he had big club experience, but also an ability to work with and improve young players. And I also wonder the knock-on effect of the squad, because the squad has been so publicly supportive of Mauricio Pochettino, more so than any Chelsea group I have seen in recent years. So if you're one of those young players, if you're Cole Palmer, who's just coming off the back of his best season in his career, if you're Noni Madueke, if you're Nicholas Jackson, if you are Trevor Chalobah, if you're Conor Gallagher, what is the knock-on effect for those players too, who clearly like the head coach, when you've got a group that have been so supportive of Pochettino through some rocky periods as well, where a lot of people didn't want him to remain as Chelsea head coach? I ponder what their reaction to this is going to be. So I think just framing this as a guy has just walked out of his job, I don't think tells the whole story. And the problem is the longer this went on, the fact that this wasn't clarified only a couple of weeks ago, shows you the lack of direction, I think, internally at the club. I think that, again, it will look like Chelsea are a bit of a mess, when really the situation this summer was, for me, so blindingly obvious. It needed to be a summer of stability. It needed to be a summer of a little bit of calm around Stamford Bridge. And what this has done 2 days after the end of the season is blow all of that up. And sure, I guess it's a little bit like the Tuchel situation, where would we have reached this stage in like November next year? So why not get it out of the way now? Fair enough. But I still don't think that gives me a lot of faith that the direction a club is heading in is one that's very clarified. And I don't think this rings, very, positive about the hierarchy. I don't think this makes me believe that the sporting directors and the way things are working at the club are that positive, are that seamless and unified. I think that there is a tendency at the club, from what I've heard, from what I've gleaned, from what what a lot of us have read from reports, but also just what we've seen with our own eyes, is I think there is a severe lack of accountability at Chelsea. I think there is a sense with the hierarchy at Chelsea Football Club that they want to take all the credit for things. They want to talk about how genius their plan is, not communicate it very well, but then don't really want to be challenged internally. And as I'll go back to again, a lot of head coaches in the modern game, when they arrive at Chelsea, when they arrive at a club with good resources comparative to some of the other clubs that some of their potential appointments have been, comparatively, you talk about Kieran McKenna just in the Championship with Ipswich. All right, for Ipswich, they have a bit of money, but comparative to Chelsea in European football, it's different. They're going to want players. They are going to want support. And again, if you are meeting expectation, leaving by mutual consent, I mean, is that basically sacking? Is that kind of a nice way of framing it? I can't believe that Pochettino, just by his own volition, has walked out the door. I cannot believe that. I cannot believe also, with the way the season ended, the way the players feel about him, that this hasn't been building for a very long period of time. So we're into crazy season again with Chelsea, but this is what Chelsea Football Club is, and it's Chelsea continually shooting themselves in the foot. And I think that it's a real shame. It really is, because I felt something building, and I'm not saying that Pochettino would have gone on to win like the Premier League or the Champions League. I was, just intrigued to see what next season could be with a summer of stability, where Poch clearly had got something out of this group of players when it looked very unlikely only a few weeks ago. So I want to hear your thoughts. I know some people wanted Pochettino gone for a long period of time, but I think you have to factor in what this Chelsea is compared to Abramovich Chelsea, what this squad is compared to the better squads we've had in the past, how this will impact the dressing room, who clearly like Pochettino, and whether there is anyone actually out in the market who is significantly better than Mauricio Pochettino. Because I don't think there is. And unless you are finding unless they have literally got someone up their sleeve that is going to provide a magnificent transformation, the likes of which we haven't seen in a long period of time, I think it could be more of the same. So those are my thoughts. I think it is a disappointing announcement. I think it's a little bit of a shock. It was always a bit of 50-50, I have to be honest. Like, the longer it went on without being clarified, I think there always is that chance that he would leave. But still, to see it out there, to see Matt Law reporting it, and to see what the ripple effect of this will be over the summer could potentially be seismic. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours. And I'll see you again from my nan's house. All the best.